So there's the elm. It looks like it's certainly just like my Chinese pistache. It the colors turn a different color on the interior of the tree. They get more yellow, which is actually kind of generic for most trees. That's the same for apple trees. The same for sumacs and wisteria. Well, wisteria just turns yellow. I mean, any tree that turns... sweet gums do it, and this is all trees that turn red. This is all the trees that turn you red. It even includes some mints. I don't remember a whole lot of the redness in the interior of the catnip. But, I don't know. It could be the same for dogwoods. When a dogwood gets its fall colors, it looks like it's gonna turn yellow this year instead of red, but there's no guarantee. But I'm gonna keep this one, and I might keep that one. This one grew a little bit slower, so maybe that's why. Maybe also it's still recovering, because this is a root. All of this is a root. It's strange. But, a root came out of, a vegetative bud came out of a root, and it was either from here or here. Maybe in a different spot, I don't know. But it was a very ugly placed root. Now, I can do a slight bit of root work, but not a lot. I also put moss over my Zamioculcas zamiofolia, because maybe that will insulate it. These leaves are definitely rotten. That's why they're dangling like this. But the bulb, the corm in the ground, that big fat mass of roots is fine. It's very, very firm. And I read up on it. It's an African plant that can tolerate zone 9. So maybe they grow up into the up high on the volcanoes that kind of get down, maybe get a bit of frost some mornings. Of course, they don't really have a fluctuation of annual temperatures because it's near the equator. But maybe they grow up there. I don't know if they're an epiphyte or not. They're probably not. But I don't know. I would like to read up more on Zamioculcas zamiofolia, the ZZ plant, which is why it's called that, because the scientific name is Zamioculcas zamiofolia. It's an Araceae of the cow lilies, I think, which are not actually lilies. They are aroids, which is also very simple to say. But anyway. This was treated as a houseplant, just like the Zamioculcas was, and that's not how the elms like it. Elms, I mean, this, how it's so much darker, even when you put all the lights on in your house, even compared to the outside, it's very, very dark. And then the composition of the light, the type of little lights the colors that are used for it are not ideal for plant growth. This one needs blue and red light, ultraviolet at the same time, and so that gives them a happy amount of light, which is often why you see grow lights are very bright. They are made out of red and blue pixels, and then ultraviolet, or they are completely violet colored, and they're very hard to look at. But this is the container I will choose, because it is not filled with clay. I will deal with this clay pot, this clay in the middle later this winter. But this elm is going in here. I don't know where the other one, the smaller one, is going in, but this pot will go to the raspberries. Unless the raspberries will get their own pot later. Who knows? Maybe the raspberries can get this pot. Because look at the stem, look at the trunks. Look at the glaucous stems. They're kind of similar, but yet I feel like everything's competing with this pot. But this pot is not suitable for the raspberries because there's no yellow on it. This one also has no yellow. It's just a plain glaze. I might be able to tell you what kind of glaze this is based on the sculpture class I took this last semester, because my semester ended and now I have a month and a half of winter break. But I think this is some kind of blue, cerulean. Cerulean, I think, is a deeper blue. But this could be a bunch of like coats of clear glaze, which has a slight bluish tint to it. But it doesn't really look as shiny, which, you know, it's possible that that's because it was left out for over a decade in an abandoned house. I don't know. But I'm gonna guess that these are definitely cerulean blue, if I'm not mistaken. I have pictures of the glazes on the wall in the classroom, and I'll look at that, and I'll be able to identify all the glazes. However, there are so many more glazes in the world. There were no red glazes. The glazes in the classroom were only a fraction of what were used in the entire world. But anyway, I would like to set up the camera, and I would like to film me doing mild root work and putting it into this container, which is like a very, very good size for it, for recovery. But I think it's still good to maybe put it in a smaller container in the next few years before I start to gradually increase the size, as I am planning on cutting this trunk right here. I hate the structure of the trunk right now. It's very ugly in my opinion. It's not naturalistically like an elm, because elms have a straight trunk and then they have these branches that go like that. Kind of like my weeping willow right now. The basic structure is like that. That's how an elm grows. As an American elm, a lot of trees grow like that. So almost all trees have that basic structure to them. They kind of go out like that. I don't know why, but I think it has to do with the combination of vigor distribution, and therefore making the shoots smaller, the branch selection, and the weight of the branches. Now, will you rest against my white poplar and cooperate? No, I don't know. I'll put it on 0.5. Hopefully the white poplar doesn't play with the autofocus. Because there's no leaves on the white poplar right now because, yeah, it's winter. There's a sunflower that's not touching the screen. I should be doing this off camera. That would be better. The phone? Oh, the phone is fine. You can see what I'm doing. Okay. I need my root rake. That's the only problem I have right now. I have got my tools. I've got my rake and my scissors. So I can just do the root combing here. I think I should just do it on the edges because I don't want to do too much disturbing of the roots. I'm just trying to bring it in closer to the tree so that I can fit it in the pot. These roots look, for the most part, alive. I'll try to fit it into a rectangular shape because that's where the pot is. So mostly on these side. maybe on the bottom, maybe I'll be able to comb out the bottom and maybe prune some of the roots so that it kind of neatly fit in the soil. Maybe I should not do any root pruning like that I usually do. Kind of a big change. You can also see the underside of the canopy is very green, and that's because we haven't gotten cold enough weather to touch to bite, or however you want to say it, to frostbite the bottom of the leaves, because the leaves are more insulated on the bottom, not from the ground, not only from the ground, but from the tree itself, in the interior of the canopy. That's why the foliage turns yellow, because there's a bit less light, and the amount of time that the leaves don't have light increases, and therefore it turns yellow. But on the outside, I think that is definitely from the cold weather. That's why it turns red. That's why it's in the transition phase, just like my Chinese pistache was in early November, and that's why it was so dark. Now, I don't want to damage my scissors, so I could use just a pair of those shears, gardening clippers. I think that will be good. Okay. My phone is leaning quite far back, but it's on the verge of falling over forward. Okay, you can see it. So here, I don't want to use my bonsai scissors because they're for little stuff and for clean roots. I'm using the wrong hand. Is this because long ago there was a conspiracy about left-handed people? Or is it because most people generally actually are right-handed? I'm thinking the latter, but you never know. There could still be some justice that needs to be noticed and recognized for these little things. But I think it is, maybe it's difficult to make things for both hands. Maybe, I don't know, for ambidextrous, that's how we need to make things. We need to make it ambidextrous friendly. Okay, so the root ball is now not as rectangular. It's more closer to a square. It's more even, the sides. However, I can kind of reduce it on these sides to make it fit the pot. So yes, I think that would be a good thing. No matter what medium of scissors I'm using, I don't really like cutting through dirty roots, because regardless, there are little pieces of rock in the soil that will damage them over time, and I don't know how to sharpen scissors. I don't think these are the same as the ones I have. the ones that I've been using. These are not the freshly sharpened ones. I'm not sure. They're not cutting very nicely anymore. If they are the same ones. Maybe in February, when this starts to leaf out again, you know, in 2 months, which is kind of funny, it's silly to think about, that in 2 months, spring is definitely going to be an obvious. February 19th, 2026, it's like, it is at least like March in any other temperate or colder places. Or maybe it would look more like April, actually. It looks like mostly what people think of as April. The flowers, the trees start to bloom, and okay, that's fitting nicely. That's fitting nicely. I don't need to do any more work. Maybe I can do it with my scissors. I have to hold them with the right hand and just pinch the blades together so that it doesn't let the dirt touch them in the interior of the scissors. I'm going to pause the footage because I don't need to show you all this and waste time. Okay. I think the remaining edges all I can do to the edges is just push them into the soil at this point, because I'm just not only trying to conserve the root system because it's still recovering from that big operation. Maybe it's still warm enough for the roots to grow slightly a bit more, because I actually still saw some growing root tips at the bottom. So that means that, you know, because I pruned the roots just slightly, they could be still reacting to that pruning and grow a little bit more. So that would be nice. Maybe I don't need to focus on the level of the soil. It is a bit high. You know, it's a bit tall. But I can take some soil out of the bottom of the root ball later this winter. But now it is time to fill the soil back in. I'm not really concerned about what soil I use yet. I'm just trying to fill the gaps. I'm not planning on, like I said, one of the pots that this Chinese elm was in, well, the pot that this was in is now being occupied by a poison oak, which is fine. I'll have to sanitize the pot if I want to use it again for this tree. However, the pot has a lip to it. It has an inward curving lip, which makes it very hard to remove the average tree. But for a succulent that you don't need to repot that often, it actually holds it in place. Now the pot is a bit large. However, I have a crassula, a large stone crop, a tree stone crop that is actually quite suitable for that size, and it has quite an extensive and coarse root system with quite large roots. So I think it would do well on there. Now the roots would have to be, maybe that stone crop should be in a smaller pot. Now I'm still searching for the right pot for that stone crop, because it needs a smaller pot. But maybe next year I can plant it in the pot that this Chinese elm was formerly in. If this is a Chinese elm, I know a Chinese elm. I feel like I've noticed that there are Chinese elms here that don't grow that much. They lose their leaves earlier, and there's Chinese elms that grow lots. They grow like a meter or like a foot or more per year, even as full-size trees. And then they keep their like semi-evergreen or evergreen. And it's never somewhere in the middle. Never. So I'm gonna guess that that's because they're either different species or they're different subspecies or they're different cultivars. I don't know. But, you know, there's a lot of organic material in the soil, so it's not the ideal bonsai soil, but it will have to do. Now I could water it. Well, we're getting tons of rain this year, and it's actually starting to sprinkle right now. So I'm guessing that the rain is going to push the soil down. It's going to make it settle in, and then I'll just see if I need to add any more soil. I know there's a bit of air gaps in this soil here. But I'll take care of those when I know that the soil is getting a bit low. Now, that doesn't mean it's coming out of the bottom. It's just settling and filling all those gaps. The rain will weigh it down, and I don't have a problem with it drying out because of that, because the humidity is going to be at least 80 the whole week. So I could leave an uprooted tree, or it's approaching that time, that level of moisture where, you know, these willow cuttings, are they still alive? They are very much still alive. They've kind of formed a bit of a callus. The leaves are kind of wilting, but they're still very much alive. And I don't know if they can still grow from cuttings, but I'm gonna find out, because it's gonna be a wet week and a half at least. And so far it looks like it stops around just after Christmas time. There's dirt on the phone. But I have potted up the Chinese elm, and I don't want to do any pruning right now, but maybe you can look at the fall colors and, I don't know, maybe we'll discuss what I want to do in the future, which is, I already said I want to cut off this part right here. I want to cut it. I want to cut the top off and probably sell that cutting if it roots. Or I could just discard the cutting, because I don't know, I'm not ready to create a plant sale yet. However, yeah. But yeah, we'll see how it does, and then I don't know if I'm going to keep this root that came off of it. Maybe I am. I don't know. But we'll see. There's actually 2 roots that survived. And then last year, these mulberries looked like this, and I'm gonna guess December 5th. So this is what December 5th looked like last year. I don't know. So if they're happening much later than normal. Also, from here, the leaves of the Chinese elm look almost black. This year, my red buds didn't really get any fall colors. They're all falling off, and they are green. So I don't know what that's from, but they look healthy. Maybe next year they will get better fall colors. But my sweet acacia, it's still growing. It's still doing pretty well. I could prune it a little bit. I don't know. I think I'm gonna just leave it until spring, but the leaves are starting to fall off a little bit. And I'm going to prune up my senna. Now these shoots, they don't really lignify. They look kind of tender still. And there's quite a few ants, which makes me wonder if there's aphids. There's a lot of ants. The ants are kind of bad because they farm the aphids. The aphids seclude, or they exude like a substance that the ants really like to feed off of. So they farm the aphids. So I don't know, but there are quite a few ants on it. I'm just gonna prune it to the first few leaves on all these long shoots. And the senna is growing like it's summer still. They're still very tender at the tips, which is nice for developing them as bonsai. Because I think they could be bonsai. Hopefully they don't just grow like a little herbaceous shrub, because that's not going to form a nice bonsai. I think the snapdragon is preventing most of the legumes from getting light. It's not even a legume itself. So I just prune that and just save these flower stalks that are blooming. They're trying to flower again. So that gives the legumes a lot more light. I wish I could show you more updates, but I think it's been long enough in this video. And I think the next thing I want to do is, there's some pomegranate seeds in the flower beds over there that I want to dig up, because I don't know how available pomegranate is for in like an out, if it's not being sold for indoor, because I don't know if they can grow indoors, but I don't know how available pomegranates are in Oregon. I'll have to do that research. But if they're not available, like they're not hardy enough for Oregon scaping, then I'll have to, well, I don't have to, but I mean, I'll feel welcome to have a pomegranate bonsai, because I want to save if the non-native ones that are not available in Oregon, I'll keep, because I like them. However, I have to go here among the watch poplars.